Great. Can you see it recording now?
Yeah.
Somebody give me a thumbs up? Yeah. Great. So I'd like to welcome Finn and Steph, who are doing our July members gathering. Finn and Steph are from Criw Compostio, and I'll let them introduce themselves, but they're going to do a session on beyond community composting. And just to say, if you've got any questions, they'd love to hear your questions as we go. And you can put them in the chat and we'll try and read them out, and we can take questions at the end as well. Steph and Finn are going to do something a little bit different. So that's quite exciting for us. There'll be some slides to see and some other things going on. So over to you, Steph and Finn.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. It's really great to be here, isn't it? Thanks for the invitation. It's lovely to meet you all. Yeah, I think we've got an hour to sort of whiz through what is beyond community composting. And there's quite a lot, isn't there?
Yeah.
Community composting.
So we establish the core first.
Yeah, because it's important, isn't it, to understand where you are in order to start to think about, well, what's beyond that. But before we go there, we kind of wanted to have a bit of a temperature check of who's in the room. So we're going to use a sort of a thunderclap type technique where we're going to ask you all to write something in the chat. It's a response to this question, but don't press enter until we say go, okay? So that then we can have all of the answers all come through all at the same time. So we'll ask you to put just one word that tells or describes why you might get involved with community composting. Is there a word that sums up what it is about community composting? Perhaps you haven't been involved, but you think that would be the thing that would get me involved. So type it into the chat, but don't press enter yet. And we'll give you a countdown and then we'll have them all flow through at the same time. It kind of helps if you're a little bit nervous and you don't want to share it in front of the group. Having us all do it at the same time makes it a little bit easier. So you've got 10 seconds left. Has everybody got a word? You ready? Okay. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Send your words. Ooh, lovely. Oh, I love this exercise. Oh, we've got all sorts of things in here. Let's have a look. So get my mouse over there. There we go. So we've got soil health has come up quite a lot. Making food. Plethy. You might want to translate that to English, perhaps.
Well,
I'm not sure I know.
I'll do it.
Oh, thank you. Using waste so much to learn, reducing plastic, obsession, oh yeah, quality compost, right, sustainability and community enterprise. Such a range of ideas, isn't there, in there? That's fascinating. We recently worked with one of our directors who was doing a master's in sustainability and behavior change, and chose to focus on community composting projects and why people get involved. And they found that actually composting is not one of the main reasons that people get involved, which is fascinating. There's lots of other reasons, and so many of them have come up here. A lot of it is about that community piece rather than the composting piece. Interestingly, we've heard that folks were even less interested in the composting and more interested in all the other knock-ons, like things like soil health or helping them grow more nutritious food or being part of something.
Or doing something about waste or making places feel more tidy, more cared for. Yeah, but sort of similar to what we've seen about climate change. You get more action when you don't address the topic, when you don't name it directly. I just wanted to bring up the plethy, which the dictionary definition, and croeso siaradur Cymraeg anar dosbarth, to plait, to weave, to fold, which yeah, we're taking to be a beautiful image of how community composting can be a way to integrate lots of different strands of activity into one coherent whole of community care, soil care, land-based care, yeah, and weaving. What other things can be woven into these practices? Yeah, it's really alive for us, that question. So great verb. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's so interesting. Really good insight. I wonder how many are you involved in a community composting practice at the moment? If you could give us a thumbs up using the emojis, if you are involved in a community composting, or just wave on the camera if that's easier for you. If you can't find the thumbs up. Oh yeah, great.
Yay.
Oh yeah, quite a few people.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Okay,
Yeah.
so we've got some brethren here. We've got some family here. That's good. Okay. So yeah, so what we were saying before, in order to establish like what's beyond community composting, we thought it might be helpful to define what we think of as core to community composting. And it's going to be different for different people, isn't it? That's why we thought it was helpful to kind of contain it for what it is for us. Has anybody heard about Criw Compost before? Have you come across this? Give us a wave on the screen if you have come across this. Oh yeah, a couple of people. Oh, that's nice. Great. Oh, good. Okay, not everybody though. So that explains why. Oh, I've got a heart there from Amy. That's lovely. Thank you. Good. So, do you want to tell our origin story? Because really, it came from you, didn't it?
Yeah,
The project.
it's good. It was good. The center conversations about how can you grow more local food without relying on these big inputs and bulk orders of compost. And just started chatting and got a little space to do a pilot to use local wastes to make more compost. Yeah, the food growing capacity doubled during lockdown because everybody was furloughed. So yeah, it was a good moment to intervene, but I'm sure any time is a good moment to intervene.
Yeah, and it was particularly exaggerated, I think, for us being at the end of the delivery road where regular compost kind of dried up and everybody got really enthusiastic about gardening. I'm sure we don't need to tell you about that. I'm sure you've also experienced that. But we felt that it was not only access to compost, but was it good quality compost? Had it traveled like a long way? Was it affordable as well for people who quite low wages around here too?
And it's available at different times. So these bulk orders mean you have to deal with a bulk amount and then sit on it. And yeah, you are the local growers want to be drip fed largish amounts rather than sit on a ginormous bulk order.
Yeah. So we're really proud of the compost that we make. There's something that's specific about our compost, which is that it's entirely from waste. So we are a small non-profit. We're a company now, and we have volunteers, but we also have paid people within the group. We're community scale by design, very hyper local, much more about sort of satellites rather than monopoly and huge global domination. We're very much about being handmade, about enriching the soil that the compost goes to, and obviously peat free. That's like a number one for us. And we make this compost and then it's available for local people to buy or to have. So we operate on a pay what you can if you can basis. So if people can afford a little bit more, they might donate a little bit more. If they need it for free, they can have it free, or they can volunteer with us and they can get it that way. We do also now add in a bit of biochar, which is kind of like our magic dust, which comes from a local biochar producers that specialize in dealing with diseased trees. So it's kind of a way of dealing with these very difficult to transport and manage kind of waste stream. Put it into biochar, the disease goes. Put it into compost and it makes the compost like really beautiful. So we're constantly working on relationships like that with other waste streams, like local carpenters who give us their wood shavings, which adds a really nice brown to our compost. So yeah, so in the last year, just to give you an idea of scale, we managed 2.3 tons of food and green waste from Mahunklet only. So we're actually processing quite a lot, but that's within our sort of regulations, isn't it?
All of the limits, yeah. So the limits are set not just so by this point you can tell we're only working with businesses, not households, because households have curbside collection already, and households wouldn't necessarily pay to be part of a club. But yeah, and so we're the maximum amount of waste we can take is the commercial waste that is being made by the food businesses in Mahantla, and the odd events as well. So we service pop-ups, like some pop-up restaurants, and festivals like the Mahantla Comedy Festival. But basically our scale is determined by the scale of our local Cartrev, like the operations that can happen here. And we're also set by the terms of the licensing, the waste transfer licenses and the waste composting and storage, which are still much larger than, so we are basically a micro haulier and a micro community compost site still. So even inside this field, there's still space to be quite a lot bigger than we are now, without breaching any license terms either, or without needing new legislation to cover our projects.
Yeah, and this is one of the ways that maybe we're different to other community composting projects, is that we've kind of professionalized one part of it, in that we are asking food businesses, by that we mean cafes and restaurants, to pay us instead of another waste management service that might be carting off to Bridgend to an anaerobic digester, or even Oxford sometimes. They're paying us instead, and we are processing that food waste within a mile of where they are, and then that compost is staying locally as well, and then they may even be serving food a year later that's grown in that compost. So it's like this fully circular bio-waste management service, and that means that we've got income coming in that's separate to grant income, which has been super helpful at sort of establishing and building relationships across the local community, but also so that we can make a job. We can actually professionalize the parts of this job that need to be really well supported, really managed really carefully, health and safety really looked after, and so forth. So that's been a key difference, I think, maybe for us.
You want to move on? Somebody's asked who's making the biochar. Is the Dovey Carbon, they're called. They've got a local woodlands, and they take the diseased larch, the Phytophthora ramorum larch, and they've got a retort. And we also partnered with them, we'll talk about this later, to do a compostable packaging biochar trial. And more and more, this local ecology of projects, obviously we're making compost for the local growers, who then sell the food back to cafes and restaurants in the vegetable box scheme. But it makes lots of sense for Dovey Carbon to be making biochar for us to put in our compost, rather than trying to sell it, it's just, so we're more and more coming together so that we can just take what each other makes and turn it into more valuable products and keep strengthening this local economy.
Yeah, and I think that's the piece around us creating this job for a compost caretaker, as we call them, the people who pick up the food waste from the businesses and then take it to one of our sites, which is in Mahantla. So it's different to the site we're going to show you today, but we've got a much larger site in Mahantla, which is lent to us by the local Lloyd's bus transport company. So they give us a space for free in their car park, which is amazing. We'll come on to talk about land and access to land a little bit later on, but we're able to then, the caretaker is able then to take the food waste there. We've got a whole safe setup, environmentally managed as well, because we're right next to a river, so we're thinking about all of these kind of knock-on effects. The compost can be produced, managed, any contamination is taken out there. So this is difficult work for those people, for our caretakers. It's attention to detail, it's care work, we think, because you're having to really be with that decomposition, with also what we might describe as the sadness of food waste, right, and hold that with dignity. And deal with that respectfully, and try and transform it then into something that actually is really great and useful. And as a metaphor, that's kind of really important for us, that it's work that's done mindfully and thoughtfully. It's not, just chuck it in a hole, smash it up. It's all the way through the process. So even at the end, when we're getting the compost out and it's done and it's almost, well, I mean, is compost ever finished? We could talk about that for quite a long time, but at the point where we're now putting the compost into its new home, sending it off to people, we go through it again, and we call that compost crumbling. We'll go through it by hand as a group of people sat around the compost, working through it with our hands, often with gloves on normally, and just checking that there's no contamination left in there. But that's a final kind of process to make sure, how is this compost? Is it really of the quality that we need it to be? Has it all got to the stage that it needs to? Are there any other things that we need to pull out? Things like bones, or large bits of wood or anything like that. So we're able to kind of really bring in the humanity in that work, and we're really keen to valorize this waste work, which is so often invisibilized or made to be something that other people do. So.
That's it. Next one. Yeah, I was just gonna say, as all care work, it's hard to make it visible. It's hard to make it people understand it sometimes. We ran some training, some community composting schools. This program was designed to help find what was the missing piece for the groups to set up enterprises like ours. So decidedly trying to step up from knowing a lot about composting or having lots of people that are passionate, or maybe having your eye on some waste. It was a great community, wasn't it? It was people that had all identified like a little group of stakeholders, whether it's a project like a forest school, a hospital, a restaurant, and try to weave a community composting project out of that could have lots of these other, that would weave in lots of other benefits for their communities. So that was a separate funded project. Constantly, is this really the next one? Constantly exploring what else we can do. There's so many more things we can do. So because we take the waste from businesses, that includes animal byproducts like bones, which we need to have a separate process to properly release the nutrients in bones. Lactic acid bacteria are amazing, super proven benefits to soil, but they need to be selected and grown in a different way.
Composties, if you're not familiar with that as a
composties, again, could be a whole separate. So basically we're exploring, now that we've created this watertight little cycle of food waste from restaurants and the role of compost caretaker, that looks like a mini model to adapt to making these other products that we know are also high value products, both from a soil health perspective, but also from a market perspective. People are buying these things in from far away. So we could also have separate collectives making them and distributing them.
I think we're trying to appeal as well to the different kinds of volunteers who get involved in a project like ours. Some people want to be involved in that, that messy food waste end of the composting, and other people like us want to get really geeky with it and explore different things like the teas, like what are we going to do with all this cardboard and paper, like what can we do in our setting where we've got X, Y, and Z streams. So we're really up for kind of experimenting and supporting people to do those explorations.
We're working in different collaborations with us. We've got an emerging collaboration with the Brecht Koch Trust on exactly these compost teas. And making EMs, indigenous microorganisms from woodland microbes. Somebody's asking, how do we control incoming material to avoid unwanted products? The most unwanted, we're trying to bring into the fold these discarded materials. We're pushing back on what we think is unacceptable waste, like the supermarket waste that should be eaten, but we're welcoming in the inevitable waste from food businesses running, meals. But our most unwanted thing is plastic. And we screen it by hand.
What we also do there is, if we notice that some particular cafe's box has got a lot of contamination in it, we will go back to that cafe restaurant, but we'll specifically go to the owner or the manager of that place, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to put the pressure on the server, who perhaps has got the least power in that situation, to do anything about it. We want to ask the manager to help facilitate. Sorry, there's a fly buzzing around in my face. We want to ask the manager to help facilitate making that part of their role, to make sure that the plastic, the mayonnaise packet or whatever doesn't end up in there, because this the person that's cleaning the plates is probably very, very busy. And if they prioritize our compost over maybe serving a customer, we know what's going to happen. So we know that if we have the manager cascading that message, it's going to be possible for that person to prioritize making sure the contamination isn't in there. So that's the main thing, the plastics. But what we also do, because we take other green waste, so for example, we take the wood shavings from the carpenters. We've had, before we started taking anything from them, or from anyone else for that matter, we have quite a long conversation about what contamination might look like for that particular material. You know, is there likely to be any glues or
laminates,
or other, you know, a difficult wood like walnut, for example, that might prohibit the growth of other plants and so forth. So we have that bigger conversation, and then when we're sure that it's possible for them and that doesn't feel unrealistic, then we'll take it. So it's about relationship a lot of the time, and I think that's the benefit of staying small as well. It's like staying hyper local, is that we're able to have those conversations each time, and when things don't quite go right, we can go back and correct it. Yeah, great question.
What else is next? I feel like some of these answers are going to come up.
Yeah.
But
we have 2 more questions on the chat for you.
Yeah. So basically, me and Steph are both working on a research project, so a separate funded research project. So that covers most of our time. All the directors are volunteer directors. So the kind of running the company is a volunteer role for 6 directors. And the compost caretaker role is 2 shifts twice a week, 2 3-hour shifts twice a week, paid at £16 an hour, plus expenses for driving your own vehicle. And that's a rolling, so it's not fair that that's just one person. It's more like it's the role, and there's 4 different people that can fulfill that role, because twice a week food waste needs to be picked up from the businesses, and that's what they're paying £10 a week for. And we can basically pay for that £16 6-hour a week job from the income from the businesses, if that makes sense. And we started with an electric cargo bike because Mahandla is a tiny, it's a 1-street town, and the site is a mile from town. So we thought electric cargo bike, perfect. No, the volume of collections is so much bigger than what fits in the bike that the time it takes to pick up by bike completely shoots the model.
Yeah.
So we're in vehicles now, electric vehicles, electric vans.
Yeah. So we have an electric van that that the compost caretaker is able to use if they don't have a vehicle that they'd rather use. So we kind of have different varieties of things. Yeah. Perhaps we can come back to some of these questions when we need that buffer time after we come back from the
because we've got a list basically. So we've been producing a lot of resources through these separate little funding things. Like the Community Compost School produced a manual that answers some of these questions, like what are the health and safety things to consider? What are the legislations to consider? What are the types of wastes that would be really high in your priority, and the ones to avoid, like walnut and eucalyptus? So we've got those things kind of compiled and ready to share as resources. This compostable packaging is a super juicy piece, isn't it? It's a super juicy piece because and it really feeds that conversation about what's a legitimate and an illegitimate source of waste, because compostable packaging replaced, plastic packaging, which is great, less plastic, but everybody thinks that compostable packaging is compostable, and they just bring it to us like it's a gift to our project. And actually it's a very bulky item. It's all completely contaminated with food waste, so it will attract vermin and smell, and it's crucially, it's a lot. It's a lot of it.
It's actually very difficult to deal with.
Very difficult to process.
Built very tough. So to rip it up is hard. I mean, it's built to hold a hot soup, right? So it's like hard to rip. So just the work hours of kind of ripping up a large volume of compostable packaging is an issue. And finding the kinds of machinery or equipment that can cope with scrunching that up it gets very expensive very quickly. And the other side to compostable packaging is that a lot of the time they will put in what are called PFAs, or forever chemicals. So these are the things that are enabling them to hold the hot soup and not disintegrate in your lap. However, for those of you who know about forever chemicals, sorry for repeating this, but those chemicals will go through our composting process. They will then sit in the soil and then they'll potentially contaminate the food that we're eating. So we don't want to put them in our compost.
We definitely don't want to distribute these things to our food growers. You know, so you could, because in the benefit of having such small composting sites is that you can have a lot of control. So it's very easy to say, okay, we'll have a different batch that has these more contentious things like compostable packaging, which don't end up in a local food growing, which might end up on a tree nursery or some other, you know, plants that have more barriers to get into the food chain. But all in all, it's basically the experiment has been to biochar it, but it still makes really poor quality biochar. And it's quite an energy intense process to get it ready for burning and stacking it all and compressing it and doing a burn to produce essentially charred cardboard.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, not a magic solution, compostable packaging.
It's like a whole separate research project there to solve the problem of the compostable packaging industry has created potentially. But yeah, we'll maybe talk about that as that could be a whole separate session, couldn't it?
And it goes back to the question that someone asked: how we stop the things we don't want? Because if the food business you're collecting from uses compostable packaging and they picked compostable because they want to support composting, they're going to assume that they can give it to you. So it's a lot of conversations to put the nuance in and the sensitivity in, and just skill everybody up in how these issues are more complex than they might seem.
Yeah, true. We just wanted to give a shout out to our Cultivate friends who we've been doing a couple of collaborations with, and you could potentially come and meet us at if you'd like. So on Thursdays at Cultivate in Newtown, we're running or co-collaborating on Thursday morning compostings. So do come along to that if you fancy. We worked with them before. We did a Making Compost Count session, which was kind of like our version of our community composting school, but more specifically around numeracy skills as well, because composting, it turns that is quite useful for sort of thinking about
visualizing
scaling
and like the rates of decomposition and how much waste you can store and how much compost you're going to produce and how much space it's all going to take up. So there's a juicy piece of just numeracy.
Yeah, but some lovely work going on at Cultivate to really create this demonstration site that centers composting as well as food growing. So really wonderful. You might even spot someone in a photo here that you recognize, that we were at the Oxford Real Farming Conference just earlier this year, where we did a compost sensorium. So we brought our compost all the way from Wales to Oxford, and we put it on a table and we invited people just to plunge their hands in it, which is a bit of an antidote to conference fever, perhaps. We created this space for reflection and thought around what this material sums up for people. So we like to do that that more
immersive and intuitive, experiential, so sort of lateral thinking around the compost. And we had a lot of quotes from different thinkers around soil and indigenous practices around soil care and spell casting, asking the microbes to do things for you, sort of engaging the multiple agencies here that aren't just, well, obviously we're asking people to do things differently, to think about waste differently, or to think about their behaviors differently. But we're not just talking to people, right? We're in this relationship with the microbiology and soil, with water, with air, with texture, with exudates, so it's nice to put all of those things in the conversation. Question about infrastructure. It's very basic, very different. We'll take a tour around some infrastructure in a second.
We do that when we
could also do a shout out for the right hand. So basically it's general knowledge. If you're going to work with food waste that includes meat and animal byproducts like we are, the right hand, this kind of insulated compost tumbler that works like an external stomach, is a very good, community scale appropriate piece of kit, which I fundraised in that first pilot back in 2021, and it's £5,000. You can get secondhand ones.
We also like to produce love letters to compost, don't we? This is our first bilingual zine. I don't say that as if we produced zines before that weren't bilingual. They're all bilingual, but this one is Diatherthio, and it was about it was a lot of different things, wasn't it? It was a love letter to compost, but it was also like practical incantations to compost and exercises and things that you could go to connect with compost. So
and it was also a good exploration of Camraig. You know, I was really surprised to find out Dairfurfio, like a Camraig word for terraforming. We work with a creative translator, Greek, who's also a poet and just a brilliant writer, to not just translate the content, but to Welshify it, or to find other references, other blind spots that we didn't have, other entrances to thinking with land-based practices in decomposition and padri, you know, rot.
Yeah, to really root it in the culture and the stories of this land as well. So that was really wonderful to work together.
More creative projects.
Yeah. We also do research. That's the thing that it's kind of keeping us the most busy at the moment. So we're working on the Carbon Innovation Fund, which is a co-op foundation fund, where we're specifically trying to create a better quality compost, which is amazing, like a potting grade compost, which is actually very difficult with food waste, isn't it? People struggle quite a lot. So we're exploring lots of different ways of doing that. And in the process, also speaking to our love of peatlands and the importance of protecting the peatlands as well. So there'll be lots more materials that will be coming out of that about how community composting projects like ours can maybe replicate some different techniques. So watch out for those on like our social media or Substack. The link that you see in the right-hand corner, that's a link to our link tree where you can get access to all our socials. So keep an eye on that, and there'll be loads of good materials being shared as we figure it out.
Recipes and ratios.
Yeah.
How do we distribute our compost? We distribute in the local area, and we don't sell it. We ask for donations. So that's how we get around the red tape. But it's not environmental agency. It's in Wales. It's NRW. So all our licenses are from NRW. But yeah, we follow the RAP protocols, and to make a compost made from waste that conforms to PAS 100 standards, but isn't certified because we don't have money to pay on inspections, and we get testing done, lab testing, but that's different than, but yeah, by not selling it with a price tag, by asking for, you can have it for free or you can pay what you want, and not letting it leave 20 miles from where it's produced.
Yeah.
Are the conditions.
Yeah.
Mindy Gors.
So this was us having a wander around our local peatland, which is near Borth, if you know that, sort of on the way to Aberystwyth. Beautiful peat bog. And we took artists and ecologists, and Alice Fowler, who's just written a book on peatlands and has got some amazing stories about the history of how we've engaged in these medicinal lands. So we love doing this kind of like the immersion and the exploration of these places and spaces, so that we can bring them alive for ourselves and make them, you know, a little bit more than perhaps just driving past. A lot of people that we know who came to that session didn't even know the bog was there and could go. So we love exploring and helping other people find
secret hidden places, and putting people inside conservation.
So now is the time. We're going to try this roving reporter mode. We're going to go out and have a look at our Abercega site. So let's slowly just make that a little bit smaller so I can see you all. Are you still there? Oh, hang on, I'll switch on my camera again. Let's have a look. How's that? Yes. Okay, we're in. All right, so we're going to have a look at the microsite that Social Farms and Gardens, thank you all, you have helped us to build, and we're now using. It's now producing some cracking compost. So I'll just turn you over to Finn.
Okay, so very slowly because we don't know how much this works. The idea here was that we're at the edge of a village by a road, and it's like a micro soil factory at the village scale where neighbors can drop off green waste, and we've got some shredders. We've mostly been lending the shredders out. That's the ideal, so that people can shred their own woody material and use it on their own gardens. Here we've actually got the rabbit poo and coffee grounds from a huntlet. So this is part of our peat-free compost mix. It's a massive bin. It took 5 months to fill this bin. It was filled up to here between January and May. And now you can see the decomposition. It's already gone down to there. And it's got worms. The worms have moved in. What have I got here? This is the one we're filling in now. And you can see like a ink cap that this is a high fungal medium, because if it's coffee and rabbit poo, you can see little rabbit poo pellets, and the rabbit bedding. So it's a really high carbon, really high fungal mix. It gets hot because of the sheer mass, but it's also full of fungus and worms from the start. And then the third bay is just called bracken, from just the hedges around here. Constant battle to keep up with bracken. But what these 3 bays are doing are giving us very clear separate wastes which will become an ingredient in the mix with the food waste, right? Because the food waste is a really high nutrient rich compost, and we essentially need to thin that down. That's why we need these separate mixes. Oh, and they've got nice lids at the front, so it should be quite easy to turn it. And we've got an inviting sign and parking. Any questions about these?
And we've also had a good quality shredder as well, so that we can, if the neighbours from the villages come in with their green waste, we can shred it and put it straight in here, and some benches so that we can make it a communal space, so we can sit around and we can chat about compost or about
Life.
So that was a very quick tour of the site. We'll just hop back now. And I'll connect in. Perhaps we can just take some questions from the chat there for a second while I plug us back in again.
I mean, this really feeds the conversation about where does waste management happening? Where's the access to land? But that will all come up. I think I picked up all the questions, didn't we? Yeah.
Jane, is there any questions from there that we didn't see, just while I'm getting this?
I think you've actually covered most of them in various ways. If anybody feels that their question hasn't been answered, please feel free to post it again, or can you take questions, people just calling out? Ask. Yeah,
That's fine.
Yeah, people want to just ask their questions directly, you're welcome to as well.
We've got more to talk about as well, but Sarah and Matt, I think. Who went first?
Yeah, we could recommend some shredders. So all of our machines,
Talk to me about shredders.
Because I know, and it's a really big decision for any project like this, because it is about finding, it's not about taking the hard graft out of it. We're not trying to take the physicality or the bodies out of it. We're not trying to place people with machines. Otherwise you end up in a large windrow site with a compost turner turning, 25-meter long windrows all day. So the shredders, it's a power tool. It's electric. So they're all electric shredders, chippers and shredders. It's called a Forest Master 300. It's quite small, it's portable, it's heavy, it's a bit noisy. Working with machines is a little bit antisocial by definition, right? Like if you can no longer talk to each other, because everybody's got earmuffs and face shields, then something's changed from sitting around the compost, crumbling it by hand, having telling each other the news. But an hour shredding gets so much volume reduction from a giant pile, of ramial wood chip, that we think it's absolutely worth it. So we use shredders quite a lot, and we actually have volunteers that just like shredding. And yeah, with the appropriate PPE and good people care and preparing the area, and they're not actually that noisy. And the more garden versions are Bosch 245 machines, which I mean, we love them.
Again, it's nice to have, I think, like a shredder and a chipper, because they produce very different materials, don't they? Yeah. So and you might want ones that take different sizes as well. So you might get quite big branches through, and you want to make sure they can cope with that. But I mean, some people actually really enjoy it, really get into it. I mean, maybe if you don't work with something quite powerful on a day-to-day basis, it can be quite exciting, and it's not something you have to do all the time either. So it can just be
we tend to that's it, like store up the bulk, or have a lot of people drop off, and then have a shredding session for an hour.
Yeah.
Where you really feel the benefit, the power of taking that time.
Yeah.
And you can make ramial wood chip, yeah, that's when you take the leaves, when you take small, up to 2-inch branches with the leaves, so with a really much higher carbon to nitrogen ratio. Shredding can be therapeutic. I find so. Yeah, I find so.
Yeah,
I think a lot of these,
a
because
bit like
these
a
are
giant nail gun
processing.
actually can be therapeutic in a way, just kind of, but not all the time. I think Matt had his hand up at one point, but
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
really, really good. Thanks for the presentation, and the tour was innovative. I love a tour by Zoom. It's different. I've been following a lot of recently. I've discovered sort of Michael Kennard's small site down in Brighton as well. But obviously, you've been a lot closer. I'm far more excited about becoming, and especially to take a trip potentially up to Newtown and see the site there. We're down in Treherbert in the Rhondda Valley. I'm just curious, just in sort of comparison slightly with Michael's sort of community subscription model. Obviously, Brighton, a far more kind of affluent community in terms of setup, and also it was quite funny actually. I'd seen a council announcement that they're now taking plastic as part of their recycling. They're really far behind, even though they're a progressive council. Wales really are ahead in terms of what
100%.
curbside facilities already exist in communities and things like that. So my question is, you've got the businesses paying subscription. What thoughts, and it can be really early doors, but in terms of scaling that up to the general kind of curbside, is that something that's come across you're thinking as yet, and how you would do that?
Yeah. We've thought about it a lot, and throughout our sort of history and growth, really, because like you say, folks here get it picked up curbside for free. There's not so much of an appetite for domestic to do that. People are asking us, but in small numbers. And at one point we were thinking about, well, what would it look like for us to pick up from domestic? It would be smaller tubs, for example, and it would be a lot more pickups for the same volume of food waste of, say, picking up from 7, 8, cafes, restaurants, much less pickups. And so it felt like, given that there wasn't a really viable, compelling reason to do domestic at the moment, we were going to park it until such time as we get and instead what we like to do is help other people to do small scale domestic composting in their street, so it could be their
networks of
cul-de-sac
neighbors, exactly like this, networks of neighbors.
So it's enabling those people to do that, and then they can have that connection to the composting process as well. And then they've also got the compost that's coming out, the connection with the quality and the contamination that's going in. So that's kind of our a view on that at this time.
Interesting angle. Thanks for that. Yeah.
The most likely thing that will make for households is like making the bokashi bran or the compost teas or the liquid feeds, because a lot of home growers want they're just going to the shop and buying some compost wrapped in a bag that's been sitting in a car park for 7 months, and they could be having more success with growing, with the liquid feeds and amendments. So we could make that from our compost, and then there's a connection with households from our compost, but not from the waste, but from the compost. And to make bokashi bran, because bokashi, some households want to bokashi compost because of the rat concerns. But then there's the barriers about what is bokashi, and it costs money, and it's, so yeah, we might, but yeah.
Yeah, I think just
we want it to be
one thing to add for that is, like, we feel that community composting for us is about helping people who won't or can't compost. So if you're a business, you're busy running your cafe or your restaurant, you probably don't have time to do the composting, or maybe you don't have the space to do that. But either way, it might make more sense for professionals to deal with that and produce a really good quality compost, rather than people kind of do it on their own and not managing very well, or having the I'm amazed that rats hasn't come up in the questions so far, because usually that comes up. That's another thing about community composting, right, is you can move that site of concern somewhere where everybody feels that that's okay, and that risk can be really well managed, so that everybody's satisfied that there's nothing coming over their garden
It's a few
wall.
ones, yeah. The rats are the visible ones, but there's actually quite a lot of health and safety regs about bioaerosols produced through composting. So there's a lot of reasons to site these facilities away from conservation, you know, from where people are really living, but not too far away. Otherwise, you've got loads of transport miles. We'll talk about this
Yeah.
just quickly. Oh, and we just turned one like a couple of months ago, a month ago.
So yeah, we've done all this. Well, I mean, we were in existence a few years before that, but we've only really existed as a company and with our directors in the last year. So we're feeling pretty good about what's possible for other community composting groups that you might be thinking about, like what is possible in that time. Yeah, so the other thing that we wanted to sort of explore really, because we're talking about beyond community composting, is like the potential for a project like this to either zoom in or to zoom out and look macro. So from a zooming in perspective, it might be, you know, Finn's favorite thing, which is getting a microscope out and helping people explore the ore that exists at a much smaller level that we can't see, but also the ability that it gives us to kind of look at macro systems and potentially the problems with those systems. I mean, we rely heavily on sort of theories around change, like donut economics, for example, and thinking about regenerative by design and distributive by design. That's kind of at the core of our ideas of these satellite places rather than one enormous anaerobic digester that then, you know, exudes gases to the local people that live around it, and it's not a very nice place to live. Ours doesn't do that. And also thinking about this kind of zero waste hierarchy. So we don't want to be supporting a system that is essentially saying, supermarket, you can waste as much food as you like because the composters will pick it up. You know, you talked about this a little bit earlier, like how can we as community composting network all speak together and influence policy, perhaps, or just rethink things like compostable packaging. How can we help people reduce that? And if that's by helping people kind of like just do it in their street, they'd like to become more connected with what is actually happening and the volumes, and how do you feel about that? So we're really interested in zooming out.
Massive. Honoring lineages, honoring, you know, somebody asked a question about labs. We use the soil ecology lab just because we've been friends with them for a long time, but they're all the way on the East Coast, but there's actually loads of soil assessment lab. Oh, we also use NRM, which are a very established lab for more advanced chemical testing and bulk density and things like this. But there's a lot more skills in this area coming closer and closer to Wales, which is really exciting. But these are ancestral practices, and there's ways that you can know your compost is good without ever looking inside a microscope, right? That's also a very like Western version of thinking about quality. And yeah, we live in a very contaminated world. We need to be careful about a lot of things, but we also need to be responsive to a lot of complex things, but responsible to more things than just the built environment or the people. Yeah, we recently started calling our sites wastescapes, like landscapes, to compare them to the other possible wastescapes that are so obscene when you really look at them from a point of view of the land, the air, you know, the rights of the water, the rights of the air, the rights of the land, and the living and non-living entities. Yeah, this is Jairo Rivero Rasrepo, a big learner person. I've been learning chromatography from him.
Yeah.
Which again is not super scientific, but is a very visual assessment of the mineral and the organic matter, the mineral, and the microbial content of your soil.
We talk in the community composting school about a whole range of different ways that you can test your compost, just using your senses or doing little growing trials to help people feel confident about what it is that, you know, their compost is good. Sorry, was that an inhale of breath question? I heard.
It was from me. You had a question earlier from Lisa, and I'm not sure if you've covered it. It was about green waste. You mentioned walnut prohibiting plant growth. Is there any other green waste that you would recommend not putting in your compost system? Any other trees or plants? And they want to pass the info on to a project.
You can still compost everything. Sorry, I didn't want to sound like,
But you want to mix it up, yeah.
but you want to compost it separately is the thing. So walnut, juniper, eucalyptus, they're all inhibiting, aren't they?
And rhododendron.
Yeah.
So that's just in terms of when you make a compost product that you then want to put on your beds. I know, and that's why people are so concerned with weeds and weed seeds, because, you know, it doesn't mean, it just means you might have to weed later. You know, if you spread weed seeds, lots of weeds, you know, like I've got self-heal growing everywhere. That's a medicinal plant. So it's not a problem to spread weeds, but it might give you extra effort with weeding. But the other thing to say is invasive species. No, we've got a massive problem with invasive species. So be very careful. You know, every time you see Himalayan balsam, every time you see Japanese knotweed, you know, they're, so invasive species that are very good at taking up niches and then inhibiting other things and knocking ecosystems out of balance.
Is it all right? Just in the interest of time, we've got only a few minutes left. Perhaps we could just finish off these and then we'll see if there's any other last questions. That's okay. So one of the other things that we do when we're zooming out, as well as thinking about lineage in time, it's also in space. So how are we standing in solidarity with other people who do this work? And we appreciate that we are PPE'd up to the eyeballs and really supported and create really safe places, but that's not the case for everybody. There are other waste workers working around the world. So how can we elevate those stories? How can we support them in other ways? Can we sponsor their PPE, for example?
100%.
You know, we've, for example, taken a stand with the Birmingham bin workers who have been on strike because of their cuts to their salaries. And generally, there's also a load of people who are trying to heal soils that perhaps have been poisoned by industry or poisoned water and so forth. So we like to think of that scale as well, and we think that that draws in different people to community composting project, people that kind of want to tackle it from different ways, like getting in touch with it, but also then feeling the impact of that that work. And then finally, just a word on food waste, which I mean is our primary input, isn't it? Which is why we think about food waste so much. It is huge. I mean, when you actually start looking at food waste, there's probably a few people on this call who are nodding along because you know about it. Like 40% of the world's food is wasted, which is just totally bonkers. And that contributes to between 8 to 10% of global greenhouse gases from food waste. So there is a lot to fix.
And also the amount of land used to grow food then is not needed. But I think the way in Wales, because we've got such a leading nation with the waste, with the food waste strategy and with the recycling targets, it is a world leading small nation. But we still have a big problem. You know, the supermarkets operating here are the same supermarkets operating everywhere else, and the supermarkets still don't have targets to properly implement food waste reduction. And there's been a pervasive, we're going to talk about subsidies and things next, aren't we? Yeah, there's a pervasive incentive through things like the subsidy to the gas to grid, the anaerobic digester system, creates a pervasive incentive to waste food because it makes it very cheap to get rid of volumes of wasted food that the supermarkets don't distribute. So these mechanisms, policies, subsidies are really powerful, but we're not seeing them leveraged at the community scale necessarily. So it'd be really nice as a growing sector to think, what are our asks? What would we like to see? You know, where would we like to see food, like waste management of this kind happen? You know, because it is going to take up some space, although we're always trying to say how little space it can take. It is going to need some space, and it can only be certain space if it needs to be, you know, low transport emissions and close to people, but not too close. So there's a juicy little matrix and then planning restrictions, you know, where can we put these little microsites? If it's on agricultural land, there's so much restriction on agricultural land. Does like soil making factories fit on agricultural land? And who wants to have that chat to pilot that? Yeah, so how much public engagement to do to ask for the changes in the direction that would support all of our projects,
Yeah. And just finally, with like 1 minute to go,
sorry.
we just wanted to say that we would love to collaborate. We'd love collaborating with other people, whether that's on art, science, research, immersive stuff, poetic stuff. We'd love to know, and we'd love to know more. So do reach out to us if you feel like that might be something that fits for you. As I say, we've got the link tree there, and you can scan that little QR code in the bottom right hand corner, but get in touch if that feels good to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Right, stop talk, wasn't it, for an hour? Well done.
That's just
Um,
that we can answer in 2 seconds.
Yes.
You've got two final questions on there, yeah.
So one is about the van. Is a second-hand EV Nissan 200, like a panel van. Looks like a white van. It fits all the compost, all the wood chip, all the shredders, all the long forks, anything you want. Flat-packed aero bins. It's dreamy. It's second-hand from a friend. It's only got 80 miles range on the clock, so that's why it was cheap. But we don't need a lot of range because we're just doing local trips. And I would recommend Jairo Rastrepa, who was on that picture. He has an online chromatography course, which is what I did, which is I absolutely adored. And it's a direct donation to Colombian agroecologists that have been committed to healing soil and peasant scale food production for ages.
Wow.
And it's a good place to send.
Could you type his name in the chat? Because I won't.
His company's called Mierda de Vaca, which I love.
Thank you.
I don't know what that was. I appreciate people might start dropping off now. So yeah, we'll say goodbye to those of you who have to drop off. But thank you very much. Yeah, we'll just type that into there. If you don't have to immediately disappear, we can stay on if you have more questions, but I appreciate you might have to go somewhere. Thank you so much for joining us. Lovely to meet you all.
I just want to say an official thanks to Steph and Finn for an amazing session and for the tour and all the things that you've taught us. Thanks for sharing the love of community composting with us. The session that they have shared is available on YouTube. It will be available in the coming weeks, so feel free to share it with your friends, community gardens and others, and share the community composting love around as well. I'm going to stop the recording now. I think if anybody wants to stay on for just 2 minutes or so with anything extra, then please feel free to. Otherwise, thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you.